Today to release the book Kandama Introspection of Initiative for Justice 2007-2015. At the outset, I must congratulate the authors of the book, Chandra Grover and Soumya Uma, as well as the publishers, United Christian Forum and Media House, for having brought this book out. This book is an important contribution to the information presently available on one of the most horrific incidents of communal violence that has taken place in India in the past decade. It will hopefully lead many to introspect on what would have been done differently, and also will hopefully lead to reparations that are urgently needed. This book offers a critical context and perspective on the gruesome riots in December 2007 and August 2008 that took place in Kandhamal in Orissa, among the poorest districts in India. The trigger for the violence was ostensibly the killing of a Hindu religious leader, which thereafter, hate propaganda by Hindutva right-wing forces quickly descended into a spiral of attacks against Dalit and Adivasi Christians in the district. This is despite the fact that Maoists took the responsibility for the killing. My association with this story lay primarily in the heading of National People's Tribunal on Kandhamal violence in 2010. Our report unequally concluded, and I quote just one line: "The carnage in Kandhamal is an act of communalism directed mainly against the Christian community, a vast majority of whom are Dalit Christians and Adivasis, and against those who support it or work with the community." Ladies and gentlemen, my association with communal riots is not new. I grew up in the city of Sholapur in Maharashtra, where the Hindu Mahasabha was very prominent. Incidentally, my maternal grandfather was the president of All India Hindu Mahasabha during the 40s. I have seen during my childhood some of the leaders of Hindu Mahasabha closely. Anyway, there was also a sizable population of Muslims in Sholapur. Tensions always existed between the two communities. At larger festivals like Ganesh Utsav, or during the month of Ramzan, or minor riots were always a routine. Shops and houses, mostly belonging to the minority community, would be burnt. There were killings sometimes. I distinctly remember one story. I must have been about 10 or 11 years old. Riots of this sort had just taken place in Sholapur. Someone told me in confidence that one boy, a senior boy, from our neighborhood, had been going around boasting that he stabbed a man. The next day, when the newspaper came, I discovered that the young boy had in fact killed someone. Who was it? A 75-year-old Muslim veteran who had been killed on his way home. This obviously had some tremendous impact in my childhood on me. And it sometimes that disturbs me even till this date. Another thing I noticed in my days in Sholapur is that after communal riots, there would be routine arrest and prosecution of some people. But these people would mostly get acquitted at the trial stage or in the appeal court. I do not recall ever having seen anyone being given due justice except announcement for some token amount of compensation. Much after I left Solapur, sometime in 2000, I heard that there had been, late 2000, there had been riots on a large scale there, and as in the past, the Muslim community was at the receiving end. I was not there, but clearly the cycle of violence was continuing with subsequent generations. Even in that case, nothing seems to happen. I have not heard of anyone being convicted or any such thing. This is what rankles several of us here today. My experience was in Solapur, most of the incidents rarely making it to national headlines. But instances of communal and targeted violence have continued throughout the history of modern India. Whether it was in 1983 in Delhi or in 1984 in Delhi and North India, the 96 riots. In 1992 in Mumbai, 2002 in Gujarat, 2013 in Muzaffarpur. The list is growing uncomfortably longer. Kandhamal is also on the list. This book seeks to understand whether the victims of Kandhamal have received any closure or justice in their lives in any form nearly a decade after the violence took place. This is not a simple story to tell. There are many layers in it. The complicity of the state, partisan and compromised investigations, shoddy prosecutions, all offer different nuances to the story. This is the first time, what was mentioned earlier, that efforts have been made to minutely examine and conduct a systematic examination of the fights pertaining to violence and offer a retrospective look at what happens in such riots. For this, I must compliment both the writers for their very methodical and meticulous work, including a detailed analysis of the court judgments. So what exactly happened in Kandhamal? After Lakshamananda Saraswati, a Hindu priest, was killed, a sense of collective guilt was imposed on Christians in the district, inhabited mostly by tribals and Dalits. The two main communities are the Kandas and Panas, and neither community was left untouched. It is estimated that about 100 people were killed and more than 600 villages were ransacked. Thousands of houses were burnt and looted. More than 500,000 people became homeless. Churches, schools, colleges, philanthropic institutions, even leprosy homes and TB sanitariums were not spared. Many people were also forced to reconvert into Hinduism. It is estimated that about 2,000 people were forced to renounce the Christian faith. In all this, as in all other cases, the most innocent and blameless, the children of the community, suffered tremendously. The state government of Odisha completely failed to act to prevent these horrific crimes. They tried to portray this as an inter-tribal dispute, which was very unfortunate. The government appointed 2 commissions, but both were ineffective. Neither commission issued any report, not even an interim report, and there is no sign of it in the last 9 years. What is particularly striking is that out of 3,300 complaints, only 800 FIRs were lodged. Out of that, only 500 odd were charge sheeted. Fast track courts were then appointed to deal with these cases, and the justice dispensed by these courts was rightly described by writers as speedy injustice. Actual murder conviction happened only in 2 cases. There were few other cases where conviction happened, but it was on a smaller offense. So what went wrong with this fast track rules? Both the Supreme Court and the High Court intervened at the right time, but nothing could happen at the ground level. The investigation was completely biased. The non-registration of FIR was normal. Many victims could not even go to the police because they could see that the accused were being openly protected by the state officials. Of the limited FIRs, some 500 or 800 odd, which were registered, most of them were flawed. No names were included. Incidents were underreported. In many cases, the police registered an omnibus FIR. The entire village would be asked to file a single FIR. 1.5-page FIR that somebody attacked the village. I mean, I don't know what kind of FIR is this. This was supposed to be a combined sort of a registration of an offence in respect of hundreds of people and the entire village. The courts never asked why victims were unwilling or indifferent to file independent FIRs. Neither were any strictures ever directed against biased or compromised investigation by the police. Any delays in investigation, etc., were technically dealt with. You have seen, that widow, and there are two other women who came before you. It is said that there was delay in FIR, and this was one of the grounds in most of the cases for rejecting or acquitting the accused. Look at the position of this. I always, when I look at this photograph, this woman, in the present situation and the way our judicial system functions, is she ever able to get justice in the court of law? Would she be able to get her FIR registered? Is she able to go to the court and depose against mighty and